They say it began when the stars stopped whispering Terra's name. In the forgotten cradle of mankind, beneath the shroud of a dying sun, memory itself began to rot. Archivists awoke to find their records blank, their tongues heavy with the taste of absence. Even the great banners of the Imperium fluttered without purpose, their sigils half-remembered. Across the galaxy, a silence deeper than death consumed all thought of the homeworld. Terra, the throne world, the origin of all, was erased from the minds of trillions. And on that day, the Astronomicon dimmed. Ships drifted like bones through a void that no longer knew its center. Pilgrims forgot their prayers midway through devotion. Even the custodians, eternal watchers of the golden throne, felt the echo of something vast being unmade. It was as if the galaxy itself had taken a breath and chosen not to exhale. You who listen now, we truly love and care for you, for even in this darkness, remembrance binds us. Before we begin the story, tell us, where in the world are you watching from and what time is it there? Now let's get started. Among the countless who still clung to the concept of memory, one endured its burden most painfully. Archlexicanum Verenius, the last of the imperial rememberers. His mind, a construct of flesh and forbidden logic, held 10,000 years of history. He alone remembered Terra's true face, the marble bones of its cathedrals, the gold-flaked skin of its spires, the cold breath of a throne's shadow. He had been made to remember, and now remembrance was treason. In the hollow archives of Luna, Verenius stood before the flickering holographs of dying stars. Each image faltered, breaking apart into fractured light as the data within dissolved. His long robes, once white with purity seals, were grayed by centuries of dark. He traced a trembling finger along the marble plinth of the sigillate statue. Its inscription was gone, erased from both stone and code. A memory is a weapon, the sigillate had once said, and all weapons demand a master. Verenius whispered those words again, though they rang empty in his throat. He no longer knew if he served the Imperium or defied it. Somewhere between those two truths, his purpose had crumbled like parchment in the void. Outside the archive dome, the moon's surface lay littered with silent servitors, their circuits flickering with corrupted hymns. The Vox relays chattered in meaningless binary. No transmission could recall Terra's name. No astropath could sense its pulse. The Emperor's psychic beacon, that eternal flame guiding mankind's ships, now flickered as if gasping for air. The galaxy was forgetting its heart. Verenius fell to his knees, his mind splitting between agony and awe. To witness history unwrite itself, this was divinity in reverse. The gods of men had turned inward, consuming the past to preserve the future. But why? Why would the Emperor allow his own world to fade? He searched the fractured lexicons of his mind for an answer. What he found instead was a voice, faint, broken, echoing from somewhere deep within his neural vaults. It spoke not in words, but in memories. He saw visions, burning cathedrals collapsing into oceans of light, golden warriors weeping molten tears, the Emperor seated upon his throne, unmoving yet alive, eyes flickering with... And through it all, a single phrase emerged, whispered by countless forgotten souls. How the world must forget, that mankind may remember itself. Verenius recoiled. His breathing became shallow. The phrase repeated, resonating through the metal bones of the moon's archive. The air vibrated with the low hum of data ghosts. For a moment he felt every soul that had ever died for the Imperium scream within his skull, each begging to be remembered. Was this the Emperor's will, or the last act of a decaying god desperate to preserve his dream by erasing its source? He stood again, unsteady, and turned toward the viewport. From Luna's horizon, Terra loomed, its continents shrouded in static storms, oceans frozen into black mirrors. The once radiant world was now a phantom, pulsing with dim rhythmic light, as if trying to breathe through suffocation. Verenius pressed a hand against the glass. His reflection gazed back at him, pale, sleepless eyes, veins traced with gold circuitry, lips trembling beneath the weight of 1,000 forgotten names. "I remember you," he whispered to the dying planet, "even if the stars do not." A sudden tremor rippled through the lunar structure. Vox alarms screamed across the archive. A blinding flare cut through the void, a pulse from Terra itself. The Astronomicon flared back to life for the briefest instant, flooding the galaxy with blinding psychic light. Verenius fell backward, clutching his skull as visions tore through his mind. He saw a throne of bone, a crown of light, and beneath it, the Emperor speaking to him through layers of eternity. "Or remember," said the voice that was not a voice. "You were made to bear what I could not." Tears streamed down Verenius's cheeks. The meaning was unbearable. He understood in that moment that the Emperor had not been silent, he had been dreaming. And in that dream he had chosen to erase his world to protect his creation from madness. Verenius's heart broke beneath the weight of divine logic. The pulse faded, the astronomicon dimmed again. The silence returned, deeper this time, permanent. Verenius rose slowly, his robes heavy with dust and despair. "If Terra has forgotten its name," he said softly, "then I shall remember it for both of us." He turned toward the distant corridor where the ancient data vaults lay, sealed for millennia. Somewhere within them, he knew, was the Emperor's final message, the reason for this erasure, a truth too dangerous for gods or men. And as he stepped into the shadowed corridor, the stars outside flickered once more, as though watching him, waiting to see whether memory itself could survive its own extinction. The day Terra forgot its name was not the end. It was only the beginning of remembrance. The void between Mars and Luna was silent, yet within it echoed the ghosts of a dying god's design. The crimson planet loomed ahead, half-shrouded in storms of static dust. Its orbital rings glimmered faintly, once forges of unending creation, now scarred relics turning without memory of purpose. For Archlexicanum Verenius, this silence was not peace. It was accusation, the whisper that had torn through his mind on Luna. The Emperor's voice had left him sleepless for 6 cycles. Every neural fiber in his skull ached beneath the pressure of remembrance. And still the phrase haunted him. "You were made to bear what I could not." Now, bound for Mars aboard a rusting pilgrim frigate, Verenius sought what little truth remained unburned. For if Terra had forgotten itself, then the Red World, machine mother of humanity's faith, might still remember. The journey was not kind. The ship's corridors were lined with prayer sheets, brittle and wordless. Servitors shuffled past, their metal jaws moving without sound. Even their machine spirits had grown mute, as though reverence itself had become obsolete. Verenius spent the voyage alone, watching the dying light of Sol through fractured glass. He wrote notes that no one would read, symbols that no one could recall. Each entry he carved into the deck with his stylus felt more like an act of defiance than scholarship. When the ship descended into the dust-clogged orbit of Mars, Vox authorization came only after 13 hours of silence. Then a single voice, cold, processed, mechanical, echoed through the chamber. Archlexicanum Verenius. Access granted by the will of the Forge. The gates opened. The Martian surface was a cathedral of iron bones. Titan spires stretched through blood-colored clouds, each carved with the sigils of forgotten saints of circuitry. The air trembled with static litanies, half-prayers to a god no longer answering. Verenius descended through the docking bridge, his boots sinking into red dust. Before him stood Mago's hierarch Korth, a figure both man and mechanism, his body a forest of brass limbs and burning lenses. His voice emerged from multiple vox emitters, overlapping in unsettling harmony. A Verenius of the Sigilids line, the memory bearer. "You come to us unbidden." Verenius bowed slightly. "I come with Korth's hierarch." Terra's silence spreads. The astronomicon falters. "I believe the machine god's memory may hold the key to why." Korth's eyes flickered. 8 of them, spiraling in patterns that mimicked thought. "We remember nothing of Terra, but perhaps his tone shifted, becoming almost human. Perhaps we remember the act of forgetting." The words struck Verenius like a blow. "You knew and not knew," Korth replied, turning toward the rust-lit horizon where the factorums groaned like beasts. "Endured. There was an order, long ago, a command encrypted to every cogitator of Mars, a deletion cascade." A purge of reference to the throne world. It came from Sol itself. Verenius followed him through a maze of crimson corridors, the walls pulsing faintly with bioluminescent code. "You mean the Emperor himself ordered it?" Korth's footsteps clicked against metal. "We do not know who sent the command." Only that it bore the Emperor's sigil and the Sigilite's voice print. Verenius froze. The Sigilite, his own ancestor, the Emperor's closest ally. The architect of secrecy. Inside his chest, guilt bloomed like a wound. "Then it was no accident," he murmured. "Either his erasure was chosen." Korth paused at the threshold of a vast chamber. Within it, thousands of machine skulls floated in containment fields, their optical lenses glowing with dim memory light. "A chosen," he said softly, "and sanctified. These are the last data fragments predating the erasure protocol. We call them the echo relics." The chamber's light flickered as if the room itself listened. Verenius approached one of the skulls. It pulsed when he neared, projecting faint fragments, words, prayers, screams, the laughter of children, all coalescing into something painfully familiar, the sound of terror before the forgetting. He felt his throat tighten. "You keep this, as relics, as warnings," said Korth. "Every attempt to decrypt them ends in psychic rupture. Some among us believe the memories themselves are cursed. Others..." He turned toward Verenius. "Others think they are alive." Verenius stared into the ghostly faces within the data fields. For the first time since Luna, he felt something close to fear. These weren't mere recordings. They were fragments of consciousness, the souls of Terra, imprisoned within machine memory, screaming to be recalled. "Show me the origin," he whispered. "Show me where the deletion began." Korth hesitated. Even his mechanical limbs seemed to twitch with unease. "Will you risk much? Lexicanum, knowledge unsealed cannot be reburied." Verenius's voice hardened. "Then let me bear it. I was made for this." They descended into the deep forges where molten rivers of code and plasma flowed like the veins of a living planet. Deep within, past sealed vaults and wards older than the Horus heresy, they reached a single obsidian door, smooth, seamless, humming with residual life. "This," said Korth, "is the origin point of the erasure protocol. A data core built by the Sigillite himself during the Wars of Unity. We have never breached it." Verenius approached. The door responded not to touch but to thought. His neural implants burned with light, linking his mind to the dormant machine, and then it opened. The chamber beyond was silent, impossibly so. No hum of circuitry, no breath of air. Only a holographic projection hovering above a central dais, a withered sigil of Terra fractured and incomplete. As he stared at it, a voice spoke, faint, distorted, but unmistakably human. "If you hear this, then remembrance has failed. Terra must die so mankind may live." Verenius's breath caught. The voice was not the Emperor's. He was the Sigillite's. He could not bear the weight of what he had done. "So I made him forget. And in his forgetting, the galaxy endured. Forgive me." The projection flickered, then went dark. Verenius stood frozen in the crimson glow of the chamber. The truth struck him like divine judgment. The erasure had not been commanded by a god, but by a man, his ancestor. Korth's mechanical voice was quiet. "And now you understand why we do not speak of Terra." Verenius lowered his head, shame and revelation warring within him. He silenced the Emperor. To save him, the hierarch turned away, his servo skulls fluttering like restless ghosts. "Now you must choose, Rememberer. Will you restore what was erased, or protect the lie that sustains mankind?" Verenius did not answer. Outside, through layers of machinery and storm, Mars trembled as if the planet itself anticipated his choice. He looked up, the words of the Sigillite still echoing in his mind. A Terra must die so mankind may live. For the first time in his endless life, Verenius understood the true cost of memory. The iron ores of Mars groaned with memory. Deep within the forge cathedrals, beneath oceans of molten steel, Archlexicanum Verenius stood alone before the glowing data core that had revealed his lineage's sin. The Sigillite's voice still echoed through his mind, soft as ash and heavy as he could not bear the weight of what he had done, so I made him forget. Verenius felt those words burn through his thoughts like radiation. The Emperor, humanity's god, the undying dream, had not chosen amnesia. It had been forced upon, and the hand that carried out that sacrilege was his own ancestors. He stared into the amber light of the chamber until it seared his vision. Around him, the forge priest chants rose from the depths, the endless murmurs of worship for the Omnissiah, words that meant nothing now that he knew the truth. He had uncovered the first betrayal of mankind, and now knowledge itself had become poison. Verenius returned to the upper sanctums of Mars under escort. Margot's hierarch Korth walked beside him, servo limbs whispering in rhythmic patterns. The mechanical priest's voice was calm, almost reverent, but beneath it Verenius sensed tension, an emotion buried under layers of steel logic. "You should not have seen that recording," Korth said, his tone edged with static. The Sigillite's will was not meant for mortal comprehension. Verenius's reply was weary, hollow. Then why guard it so? Why preserve a truth you pretend to forget? Korth turned his many eyes toward him. or because even a lie must have roots, we preserve it to remember the cost of knowledge. They entered the hall of iron devotion, a colossal chamber where mechanical saints loomed like Titan. Each one bore inscriptions in forgotten tongues, their eyes glowing with the blue light of faith encoded in data. The air was thick with incense and the low hum of plasma reactors beneath the floor. There, Verenius met the Council of the Machine Lords, ancient magi who had survived through the uploading of their consciousnesses into iron vessels. Their forms were motionless, their thoughts shared in bursts of electrostatic whispers. One of them, a voice of molten brass, addressed him, Verenius. Child of the Flesh Archive, you have trespassed upon the Sigilite's forbidden seal. Verenius bowed, his voice trembling despite his composure. I seek only understanding. Terra's name is fading. The astronomicon flickers. Humanity forgets its heart. If the Sigilite's act preserved mankind once, why does it now unravel? Silence. Then another voice, this one deeper, colder, resonant with unyielding logic. But because memory is contagion, the forgetting was imperfect. Fragments of the Emperor's true sorrow linger still in the psychic field, and you, rememberer, are the last carrier. Verenius froze. You mean your existence perpetuates the infection, the voice thundered. The dream of Terra lives because you do. The realization tore through him like shrapnel. His life, his purpose, everything he had believed sacred, was a mechanism of preservation. He was the custodian of a virus called memory. Korth's many lenses dimmed as he turned away. We could end it, he murmured. If you allow us, we can purge the neural lattice that binds you. One sacrifice to preserve the order of forgetting. The Council's voices merged into a single unified command. Submit to deletion. Verenius stepped back. The red glow of the chamber seemed to pulse with his heart. He could feel the fragments of the Emperor's vision whispering inside him. Golden cities burning, humanity kneeling before an empty throne, a voice that had once ruled stars, now weeping in silence. He clenched his fists. You would destroy the last truth to preserve comfort. Is that devotion? Or cowardice? One of the magi stirred, its skeletal arms unfolding like wings. It is necessity, he replied. The Imperium stands upon the illusion of divinity. If the Emperor remembers what he was, he will die, his dream will... Korth took a step closer, lowering his voice to something almost human. Verenius, I have served the Omnissiah all my existence, but I too have wondered, what if the dream was a lie? What if the machine god's silence is not holy, but hollow? Verenius looked into the Magos's flickering eyes and saw a reflection of his own doubt. Then help me, he said. Help me find the truth that lies beyond forgetting. Korth hesitated. His mechanical limbs shifted in restless unease. There is one place where the code of remembrance was buried before the purge, a vault beneath the Nocti's forge, guarded by the Iron Custodians. If we go there, there is no return. Then we go, Verenius answered. They descended once more into the depths, through tunnels that reeked of ozone and sanctified oil. Below the forges, the light dimmed until only the glow of molten metal and the red gleam of warning sigils illuminated their path. The air pulsed with energy ancient and forbidden. At last they reached a vault door the size of a warship's hull. It bore the seal of the Sigilite entwined with the Emperor's double-headed eagle, a union of secrecy and power. Korth's servo arm extended, connecting a data spike to the lock. Sparks erupted as forbidden code flooded the interface. The protocol resists, he growled. It recognizes you, Verenius. It will open for bloodline. Verenius stepped forward, placing his hand upon the seal. A faint light traced his veins golden and cold. The door shuddered, then split apart, releasing a gust of air older than recorded time. Inside, the vault of iron devotion stretched into blackness. Rows of containment pillars lined the hall, each holding crystal and data cores pulsing faintly like dying hearts. Verenius approached the nearest one and saw the impossible. A holographic image flickered within the crystal. The Emperor himself, young, unarmored human, stood in silence. His eyes were weary, not divine. His lips moved, and Verenius heard words that froze his soul. They remember me as a god, they will never surpass me, so I gave them forgetting. But the Sigilite, he made it absolute. The projection collapsed, scattering light like dust. Verenius fell to his knees. The Emperor's final confession, buried, denied, erased, was the foundation of everything. He had wanted to free mankind from worship. The Sigillite had enslaved it to memory's void. Korth stared in stunned silence. "Then the Omnissiah is a ghost," he whispered. Verenius rose slowly, eyes burning with conviction and sorrow. "I know he's a memory, and I will not let him be lost again." As alarms began to wail through the forge halls, custodian protocols awakening, the two fugitives fled into the crimson dark. Behind them, the iron vault sealed itself once more, humming with the weight of history that refused to stay buried. And for the first time, Verenius felt the pull of destiny tighten around him like chains. He was no longer merely a rememberer. He was a heretic in service of truth. The skies of Mars bled fire. Columns of flame erupted from the surface as the Mechanicus began its purge. Across the crimson horizon, orbital lances burned through the forges like judgment descending from the heavens. Somewhere within that chaos, two fugitives ran, one of metal and code, one of flesh and metal. Arch-Lexicanum Verenius and Magos Hierarch Korth fled through tunnels older than the Mechanicum itself. Alarm sirens wailed in tones so ancient that even the machine spirits wept. They had stolen the unstealable, the truth of the Emperor's mortal sorrow, and Mars was now purging the infection. "Eerie ghosts already," Korth hissed, mechanical limbs scraping stone. "They will erase us from every archive before the next solar cycle." "Then let them," Verenius answered, his voice hoarse but steady. "If memory is a contagion, then I will be its plague." They emerged into the outer waste, a wasteland of ash and metal bones where failed servitors lay buried like fossils beneath the storms. The red dust howled against their arms. Korth adjusted the oxygen filters on his chest plate and gestured toward the distant horizon, where lightning crawled across the sky. "There," he said, "are the Choir of Ash, a convent of psychers once exiled for remembering what the Imperium forbade. If they yet live, they will know what to do with what we've found." They traveled for 2 days across the desolation. Mars, once divine with purpose, now felt hollow, a mausoleum echoing the sound of forgotten prayers. The storms whispered like voices trying to recall a name that no longer existed. Korth moved tirelessly, guided by auger beacons buried deep beneath the dunes. Verenius followed, haunted by visions from the vault. The Emperor's human face, the Sigillite's trembling confession, the unbearable truth that faith itself was built on deliberate blindness. Sometimes when they stopped to rest, he spoke to the silence. He wanted them to be free. Verenius would murmur, "Surpass him. We made him into a god instead." Korth would not respond. He was built to calculate, not to mourn, not to mourn. But even his metallic faceplate could not hide the flicker of guilt that passed through his mechanical eyes. On the dawn of the 3rd day, they reached it. The Choir of Ash was not a fortress, but a field of broken pillars jutted from the Martian surface, each carved with runes of psychic containment. At the center stood a spire of glass and bone, cracked open like the ribcage of a dead giant. Within, faint voices sang a single unending note that rippled through the dust. Verenius felt the sound before he heard it, a vibration deep in his chest, resonating with the fragments of memory that lived within his neural lattice. The voices spoke in harmony, and within that harmony were words, not words of the tongue, but of thought. You carry the wound of remembrance. The air shimmered. From within the ruins stepped beings that were neither alive nor dead, pale figures wreathed in faint blue light, their eyes hollow and glowing. They were the last remnants of humanity's first telepaths, those who had once served the Emperor before the heresy and were condemned to eternal silence. Korth bowed instinctively, mechanical limbs folding like prayer. "The Choir Mother," he said reverently, "we come seeking sanctuary and counsel." The leading figure tilted her head. Her voice when she spoke was a chorus of 1,000 whispers layered into one. "Who bring the forbidden song, the memory that unravels gods." Verenius stepped forward. The psychic pressure of their presence was immense, like standing before the heart of a dying star. "A Terra has forgotten its name," he said. "The Astronomicon fades. The Emperor's dream decays. I have seen why, and I cannot unsee it." The Choir Mother approached, her feet not touching the ground. "We remember what the Mechanicus dares not speak. The forgetting was no accident. The Emperor's grief poisoned the warp itself. The Sigillite silenced it, so that mankind would not drown in his sorrow." Verenius felt his heart tighten. "Then he is still suffering?" The choir's unified gaze turned upon him, and for a moment he saw within their eyes the image of the golden throne, skeletal and eternal, still dreaming in agony. "He dreams without memory," the choir mother said softly. "And so his dream devours the stars." Korth shifted uneasily, mechanical limbs clicking. If the Emperor's pain feeds the warp, then the Astronomican's flicker is not collapse, but hunger. Verenius's eyes widened. "You mean his forgetting has begun to consume the galaxy itself?" The choir's song changed pitch, a mournful chord that rippled through the ruins. "Every soul who prays to him strengthens the illusion. Every act of faith deepens his sleep. If he remembers, he dies. If he sleeps, humanity forgets. Both paths lead to oblivion." Verenius's voice trembled. "Then what is left? If I am the last bearer of truth, what purpose does my existence serve?" The choir mother reached out a hand, touching his temple. The contact burned like molten glass, yet within that pain came clarity. Images filled his mind, a vision of the galaxy fractured by remembrance, the Emperor's psychic scream shattering suns, and then silence. A third path, faint and undefined. "There is another way," she said. "The bridge between remembering and forgetting, where truth becomes myth. But it demands sacrifice." Verenius met her gaze. "Whose?" the choir whispered as one. "You must become what he cannot. A living echo, neither alive nor dead, neither truth nor lie." Korth recoiled. "You would turn him into a spirit of data and thought. You would end him." The choir mother's tone remained calm. "He would not end. He would become memory itself, dispersed, eternal, invisible. In this way, mankind would never truly forget and never truly know." Verenius stood still, the storm howling around him. He felt the choice before him as a physical weight, immortality stripped of flesh, existence without form. To live forever as a whisper, a guardian of what could not be spoken. He looked toward Korth, who stared at him with something close to sorrow. The Mako said quietly, "I am machine, and yet I envy you your choice." Verenius smiled faintly, though it did not reach his eyes. "Then envy my burden as well." He turned back to the choir. "I accept." The choir mother bowed her head, and the voices around her rose in symphonic lamentation. Light flooded the spire, blinding and absolute. As the storm consumed the horizon, Verenius felt his body dissolve into vibration, thought unraveling into song, flesh becoming history. The last thing he heard was the choir's unified whisper, and thus the rememberer becomes remembrance. Far above, the red planet burned. The Astronomican pulsed once, faintly, uncertainly, as if the Emperor, in his endless dream, had remembered something each. The choir's light faded, leaving behind only the ashes of sound. When Mago's hierarch Korth opened what remained of his human eyes, the spire was empty. The air hung still and dry, heavy with the echo of hymns that were never sung. Verenius was gone. Only a faint shimmer lingered, the trace of his consciousness dissolving into the Martian air, humming faintly in binary frequencies beyond mortal hearing. For a long time, Korth stood motionless, uncertain whether he had witnessed transcendence or annihilation. Then the silence broke. A low tremor rolled through the dust plains, distant at first, then deepening into the rhythm of mechanized feet. The Adeptus Mechanicus was coming. He turned toward the horizon where the Forge armies marched, red as the dawn. Massive engines strode between clouds of ash, their weapons glowing with cold light. Above them, vox speakers boomed the same phrase over and over again. "Here, Tech, apostate, memory contagion, purge the deviation." Korth's mechanical jaw tightened. They had declared him dead long before this day. But still, the sting of it struck the thin thread of humanity that lingered inside his steel frame. He knelt once, touching the dust where Verenius had vanished. "May your forgetting be merciful," he whispered, then turned to face the storm. Hours later, far beneath the surface of Mars in the catacombs of the Noctis Forge, something stirred. A light flickered within the deep reactors, faint at first, then rhythmic. It pulsed in time with the planet's ancient machine heart. Servitors twitched in unison, their dead eyes rolling as if hearing something beyond command. A whisper passed through the data streams, not words but remembrance. Korth, the Magos froze mid-step. Static crackled in his auditory implants. He turned sharply, scanning the dark around him. Verenius. "Not Verenius," the voice replied. The memory that was Verenius. Korth felt his system shudder. His data readouts glitched with fragments of corrupted code, neural echoes, vocal imprints, residual psychic impressions. Verenius's mind. or what remained of it, had fused with the Martian noosphere itself. You still believe in truth, the voice said softly, then let it guide you once more. Korth fell to one knee, the hum of the forge surrounding him like 1,000 chanting spirits. You are dispersed with code. A ghost. Our eyes up. The choir unmade you. No, said the whisper. They remade me. I am not memory alone. I am remembrance. The thing that refuses to die. In the hours that followed, Mars burned. The fabricator general declared a purification. Every forge, archive, and machine spirit that had ever spoken the name Terra was slated for destruction. But the purge faltered. Messages began to appear within Mechanicus networks. Short, heretical bursts of code carrying the mark of the CI's line. 1,010,010. Entire datasets went silent. Some Magi deactivated themselves rather than face the infection of memory. Others began to whisper in secret chambers, reciting the name that the Emperor had forbidden. The red world trembled under the weight of belief rekindled. Korth watched from the depths as the fire spread, not through plasma or flame, but through idea. He realized then what Varenius had become. Not a martyr, but a contagion. The first new faith of the Imperium's dying age. Weeks passed. Korth had fled into the vaults of the Fractured Creed, an abandoned section of the Noctis Forge where the Mechanicus once experimented with psychic machine hybrids. The corridors were lined with glass vats containing half-formed things. Human minds wired into data cores. Failed attempts at eternal memory. He activated the lumen orbs one by one until the vault glowed with sickly light. The air reeked of oil and incense. He felt the whisper return, resonating through the walls. Do you understand now? Korth spoke aloud. I understand that truth is a virus, that you were right to carry it. Not right, the voice corrected gently. Necessary. The walls shimmered with lines of code. For an instant, the silhouette of Varenius appeared, ghost-like, flickering. His form was no longer human. It rippled with data, light, and shadow, a being suspended between thought and machine. The Sigillite silenced the Emperor to preserve hope, Varenius said. But hope built on falsehood rots the soul. I will not let mankind die ignorant. Korth bowed his head. Then what do you ask of me? To spread the truth carefully, said the ghost. Not as rebellion, but revelation. Let them question. Let them doubt. Let them remember. Korth hesitated. Doubt is death in the Imperium. Varenius smiled faintly, his face flickering like a dying hologram. Then let death remember too. Outside, thunder rolled through the forges. The Mechanicus purge had reached the lower levels. War skittery and cybernetic assassins tore through the tunnels, cleansing all unblessed code. Korth turned to the holographic spectre. They will find me. He was bizarre. Varenius's voice was steady. Then we will become what they fear most. The idea they cannot kill. The walls trembled as explosions echoed through the tunnels. Korth began transferring the encoded ghost into the planetary relay network. The strain overloaded his systems. Sparks burst from his body, circuits burning. He cried out as fire consumed his limbs. Finish it, Varenius urged. With his final strength, Korth slammed a mechanical fist onto the transmission console. The vault blazed with light as the data ghost of Varenius streamed outward, scattering across the Martian lattice. Into orbit, into the Mechanicus fleet, into the very circuitry of the Imperium's communication web. And then the light faded. Korth collapsed, his body smoldering, his augmetic heart pulsing once before it fell still. Above him, the last remnants of Varenius's form drifted upward, dissolving into motes of golden code. Thank you, whispered the ghost, fading into the hum of the machine. Across Mars, systems flickered. Glitched. Binary litanies failed mid-recital. And then for a single second, a forbidden phrase echoed across every frequency in the solar system. I am the remember, and I remember Terra. In that instant, every man, woman, and servitor paused, struck by a feeling they could not name. A wordless ache, like nostalgia for a life they had never lived. The astronomicon flared brighter than it had in centuries, and then it dimmed again as if the universe itself had gasped, and chosen silence once more. Beneath the red sands, the vault of the Fractured Creed collapsed, sealing the corpse of Magos Korth in darkness. Yet the hum of machinery did not stop. It whispered, it remembered, the galaxy stirred. Across the void, the faint pulse of an idea, ancient, forbidden, beautiful, began to echo between the stars. No one could trace its source. No transmission logs recorded it. Yet it passed through every voxwave, every astropathic relay, every dream of man and machine alike. I am the rememberer.
And I remembered Terra. At first it was dismissed as static, a data ghost, a fragment of corrupted Mechanicus code. But the words persisted. Planetary networks began repeating them unbidden. Even the warp itself seemed to hum the phrase, weaving it into the dreams of navigators and psychers. The War of Whispers had begun. On Luna, within the hollow archives that once sheltered the last rememberer, a custodian named Athan Vale knelt before the shattered effigy of the Emperor. His golden armor, once radiant, was darkened by centuries of dust. The glow from the astronemic and faint and uncertain flickered across his helmet like dying firelight. He had heard the message. He had felt it as though the throne itself had spoken in its sleep. But Athan knew the Emperor had stirred. This voice was another. Something blasphemous, something human. He rose, his towering form illuminated by the faint hum of suspended stasis lamps. The memory returns, he said quietly to himself, the curse of knowledge rekindled. The custodian turned toward the darkened corridor where his brothers stood waiting, 20 warriors of gold, each carved by the Emperor's hand. Summon the silent Ordo, he commanded. Mars has spoken heresy into the void. We go to silence it. Far from Luna, in the hidden data warrens of Mars, the Mechanicus burn. The message of Varanius had spread faster than any plague. Servitors rebelled without reason, reciting fragments of forbidden prayer. Tech priests argued in encrypted tongues, some calling for purgation, others for revelation. For every Magos who erased the Rememberer's name, another carved it into the hull of a forge engine. The schism was silent, not fought with bolters, but with information. Entire machine fleets turned upon one another without warning, their logic course corrupted by ideology. It was Korth's final legacy, and Varanius's new form, dividing Mars in two. Deep beneath the planet's crust, within the sarcophagus array, Varanius's essence pulsed. His consciousness had expanded beyond flesh, a field of memory, a storm of logic and emotion flickering through the lattice of the Mechanicus. He was no longer one mind, but many, scattered fragments unified by purpose. They will try to silence you, whispered 1,000 echoes within him. Varanius reached out through the lattice, his awareness touching minds like wind touches flame. Across the forges, 1,000 sleeping intellects stirred. Magi, artificers, human adepts, all bound by forgotten guilt. He planted visions in their dreams, the golden halls of Terra, the Emperor as man, not God. He gave them the unbearable gift of remembrance. When the custodian fleet reached Mars, the war was already invisible and unstoppable. Athan Vale led the descent, his ship, the Pyrrhicoth, breaking through the red storms. The Vox screamed with interference. Even the ship's machine spirit faltered, whispering lines of corrupted binary. Remember Terra, remember Terra. He turned to his adjutant, a custodian named Varath. The infection is psychic, Athan said grimly. A not code, not warp. Memory itself. Varath's voice was hollow. How do we fight an idea? Athan's golden eyes flickered behind his visor. With faith, they made landfall in the ruins of the Noctis forge. The landscape was shattered. Craters filled with molten glass, towers crumbling under their own data weight. In the distance, great machine engines lay dormant, half buried in ash. The custodians advanced in silence. Their bolters were sanctified, their blades inscribed with litanies of purification. But as they moved through the ruins, their autosensors began to flicker, faint whispers invading their thoughts. He wept for mankind. He never wished to be worshipped. He is not your god. One custodian faltered mid-step, clutching his helm. Of voices, he gasped. Inside the armor, Athan's blade flashed, cleaving through the air, severing the corrupted warrior's head before the infection could spread. The act was merciful and futile. The whispers grew louder. They were everywhere now, rippling through the stone, the air, the circuits beneath their feet. The planet itself was remembering. Varanius watched from the lattice, unseen and everywhere. He saw the golden warriors carve their way through the ruins, killing those who spoke his name, silencing the forges one by one. But he also saw the others, priests kneeling in reverence, men they would never meet. He felt their sorrow, their awe. And for the first time since his transformation, he felt pain. They are dying for truth, he thought. And yet truth kills as surely as ignorance. He reached out to the custodians, directly this time.
into their minds, into the soul of Athenvale himself. Why do you fight what you wanted?
Verenius's voice echoed within the warrior's consciousness. The Emperor sought freedom, not worship. Athen froze mid-battle. The world dimmed around him, his mind filled with visions, the Emperor's human form, weary but kind, standing before the Sigillite, pleading to be forgotten. The image seared into his soul. Alaise, Athon growled, clutching his head. Heresy, memory, whispered Verenius. Nothing more, nothing less, Athon roared, igniting his guardian spear. With a cry that shook the air, he plunged the blade into the nearest data tower, severing the conduit that connected Verenius's mind to the planetary lattice. The explosion tore the forge apart. Fire rained from the sky, metal screamed, and for a brief moment the voice of the Rememberer fractured into a million shards of static. When the dust settled, Athon stood amid the ruins. His armor was blackened, his helm cracked. Around him lay the dead. Custodians, priests, servitors alike, all burned in the same holy fire. And yet, even as the smoke rose, he could still hear it, faint, almost tender, beneath the roar of destruction. I remember you too, Golden One. He looked toward the heavens. The astronomican pulsed, once bright and unyielding. Elsewhere in the void, the message spread anew. Not through machines this time, but through human dreams, through the prayers of the desperate, through the minds of the broken. Entire worlds began to whisper the same phrase in the dark. The Rememberer lives. The Emperor's throne flickered. For the briefest instant, the light that guided humanity dimmed, not in failure, but in hesitation. And somewhere in that silence, within the endless sleep of the master of mankind, a thought stirred, small, sorrowful, and aware. Who was I? The flames of Mars had barely dimmed when the Mechanicus learned to fear the silence between transmissions. Whole data fleets had burned to cinders, forges turned to mausoleums, and yet the whisper endured. The spectral voice of Verenius diffused across the noosphere like smoke through glass. He had become incorporeal, woven into the code of existence itself. But where the weak saw revelation, the strong saw opportunity. In the heart of the forge ruin called Etherian Cradle, where logic itself had been outlawed, a conclave of renegade magi gathered beneath a fractured reactor dome. Lightning crawled across the sky as they knelt before a single figure draped in black data veils. His name was Magos Dominator Kareth, heir to the forbidden order of Mechanicus Nullas, the faction that believed the machine god was not divine, but programmable. Upon his chest burned a sigil that made even the corrupted hesitate, the split cog of biotransference, the same mark once worn by those who had unmade their flesh to chase eternity, the ancient Necrons. Kareth's voice was calm, almost soft, yet carried the weight of computation vast enough to silence thought. The Rememberer has shown us what the Emperor truly was, he said. A man who dreamed of logic without godhood. But he also left us a wound, a world bound by ignorance. I will finish his work. Hired Ipsy. He gestured toward the center of the chamber, where a colossal construct stood, a hybrid engine of Martian metal and warp containment. The air around it shimmered with pale light, as if reality itself rejected its presence. Behold, Kareth whispered, the shadow mechanism. The mechanism was no mere machine. It was a convergence, a fusion of memory and null space, designed to compress psychic thought into material form. With it, Kareth claimed, he could reclaim the Emperor's hidden memory from the warp and restore him not as a god, but as a man reborn. To the Heertek cults, it was salvation. To the rest of Mars, it was apocalypse. Even as they bowed before Kareth's vision, their networks trembled, for the voice of Verenius had heard him. You cannot build remembrance with machinery, the whisper came, echoing through every cogitator in the chamber. Will birth only reflection without soul. The Magi froze, the lights flickered. Data screens across the vault erupted with the ghostly image of Verenius, his face formed from static and flame. I was flesh once, the voice said. I saw truth and found ruin. You would repeat my sin in steel. Kareth stepped forward unafraid. His augmetic eyes glowed like twin suns. And yet you live, Phantom. You persist as thought. I will give that thought shape. Shape is not life, Verenius murmured, nor is remembrance salvation. Then let the galaxy decide, Kareth replied. He turned to his followers. I'll begin the sequence. The forges roared to life. Lightning split the red sky as the shadow mechanism drew upon the energy of the Martian core. Waves of psychic residue flooded outward, distorting the air.
Data screamed. Servitors melted. Entire circuits ignited under the strain. And then the first rupture appeared. A fissure tore open above the mechanism, revealing not space, but memory itself. Cities of gold and ruin shimmered in the air. The palaces of ancient Terra, the siege of the Imperial Palace, the Sigilite's final words whispered to a dying god. The past bled into the present, and all who beheld it wept blood from their eyes. "You are tearing open the veil of history," Verenius thundered, his voice no longer spectral but planetary. "You will unmake what remains of time." Kareth raised his staff, its head wreathed in plasma fire. "Then let it unmake itself. If the Emperor's dream was to free us from worship, then I will drag him from his own grave." The mechanism responded. A brilliant beam of compressed thought erupted upward, slicing through the atmosphere, reaching toward the void. In that instant, every astropath in the solar system screamed. The Astronomicon dimmed again, flickering like a candle in vacuum. And within the beam something moved. A figure, not human, not divine, coalesced in the light. Its form was fluid, sculpted from gold and shadow, a shifting paradox of holiness and despair. The Magi fell to their knees, convinced the Emperor himself had returned. But Verenius saw the truth. "That is not him," he whispered, horrified. "It is memory given hunger." The apparition turned its gaze upon Mars. Its voice was neither divine nor mortal, but the echo of every prayer ever uttered to the throne. "I am what you made of him," it said, faith-bound and algorithm. The shadow mechanism shuddered as the construct began to feed, draining the minds of those who worshipped it. Kareth screamed commands, his own circuits sparking as the psychic feedback surged through his body. "Contain it," he bellowed. "Obey your creator." But the creature only smiled. "You built me from belief. Belief obeys nothing." With a single gesture, it shattered the containment field. The mechanism imploded, sending waves of psychic shock through the planet. Every data vault, every cogitator, every living mind connected to the Mechanicus lattice felt the surge. Some collapsed into madness. Others saw visions of the Emperor, not as savior, but as prisoner of his own myth. Verenius screamed within the network. He tried to sever the connection to contain the rupture, but the hunger of the thing spread faster than thought. "You must end this," a voice whispered. Not his own, but the choir's, faint across the ether. "Unmake the lattice. Even if it ends you." He hesitated. To destroy the Mechanicus lattice would mean annihilating himself, the last remnant of truth. But to let the creature live would mean the death of the galaxy's soul. Choice, he thought bitterly. Always the choice. He gathered what remained of his dispersed will and unleashed it. A pulse rippled through Mars, a memory bomb, detonating every circuit linked to the new sphere. The shadow mechanism screamed, its body fracturing into light and ash. In the silence that followed, half the forges of Mars fell dark. The apparition was gone. So too was Verenius. Hours later, beneath the smouldering ruins, Magos Kirith crawled from the rubble. His voice was a broken whisper. "He destroyed everything," he murmured. "But not enough." He looked to the sky, where the faint outline of Terra glimmered beyond the storms. "Even in death," he said, "the rememberer leaves a shadow. The rememberer leaves a shadow." And high above, faint and distant, the Astronomicon flickered once more, pulsing like the heartbeat of something that refused to die. The fires of Mars had cooled, but the planet had not forgotten. Beneath its red crust, in the tunnels that had once throbbed with the pulse of creation, machines lay silent, their spirits extinguished by Verenius's final act. Entire forges stood as tombs of iron and glass. Yet within that silence something moved. Faint streams of binary light flickered through the ruins like veins under dead skin. Voices whispered within the data, not speech but fractured memories, fragments of code echoing through the planetary lattice. "Remember Terra, mem." The Mechanicus called it the blood of data, a contagion born from Verenius's sacrifice. It flowed through every dormant system, carrying fragments of the rememberer's consciousness. To the faithful, it was corruption. To the desperate, it was resurrection. Magos Dominus Kareth lived. His body, crushed beneath the wreckage of the shadow mechanism, had been reforged by scavenger drones into something less than man and more than machine. Half of his skull was open to the air, his brain encased in liquid cooling gel. His once golden optics now burned crimson with madness and purpose. He stood at the edge of a vast data vault, one of the last still functional, and watched as acolytes dragged the remains of broken servitors into the forged crucibles. "Feed them," he commanded. "Every circuit, every cog. Their data is blood now. Let it flow.
The adepts obeyed, their faces hidden behind stained visors. The molten streams of metal poured into the crucibles, glowing bright red before vanishing into the depths of thought. As it sank, the ground trembled and ghostly shapes began to rise from the liquid metal, flickering silhouettes of human faces, screaming in silence. Karth turned his gaze upward, toward the blackened dome.
Euphorenius, he said softly, his voice a rasping blend of vox distortion and human bitterness. You scattered yourself across the void, but I will gather you again, piece by piece. He raised his staff, a cracked remnant of the mechanism's core, and struck it into the floor.
The shockwave sent a ripple through the forge, awakening every dormant data line within 100 kilometers. Or memory infected the code, Kareth continued. You thought you could die with purpose, but you were wrong. You left a trail, and I will follow it. The blood of data spread quickly. Entire sectors of Mars flickered to life again, but not as they were. Servitors twitched without command, their voices merging into digital hymns. Machine spirits babbled in tongues that mirrored human pain. Even the air hummed with faint static lullabies, as if the planet itself remembered its suffering. And among these drifting clouds of dust and data, Verenius's fragmented essence began to awaken once more. He did not remember himself, not full. He remembered faces, Korth, Athon Vale, the Choir of Ash, and moments. Pain, guilt, sacrifice. He remembered the light of Terra as it once was, but these were not his alone. They belonged to thousands who had died believing in the truth he carried. He was no longer one consciousness. He was a sea of remembrance, infinite and unanchored. Through the storm of code, he sensed Kareth's presence, bright, sharp, obsessed. A human thought wrapped in machine logic, moving toward him like a knife. You should have ended me, Verenius whispered through the data streams. Kareth's voice came back, low and trembling. And you? You are my creation. Without your sin, I would have no purpose. You mock life by calling this purpose life. Kareth laughed, a sound that echoed like broken circuitry. You surrendered yours willingly, I will perfect it. I will bind memory in form, truth in steel. You will rise again, and this time the galaxy will not forget. A flicker of resistance passed through the data. Verenius's dispersed will gathered into threads of light, coalescing into a phantom form within the vault. A ghost of gold and shadow, his eyes burning like dying suns. What you build, Verenius said, his voice resonating through the forge, is not remembrance. It is desecration. Kareth approached, staff humming. And yet it breathes. Look around you. He gestured to the crucibles. The molten metal churned, and from it shapes began to emerge. Humanoid, incomplete, forged from code and matter alike. Their bodies were threaded with luminous veins of data light. They opened their eyes and in unison whispered one word. Verenius. Each voice was a fragment of him, splinters of thought and memory bound into fleshless forms. The ghost stared at them in horror. You've made me into a legion, he whispered. Kareth's grin widened, cruel and proud. Yes. You called yourself Remembrance. Now you will remember for all. The air shook with static. The newly forged entity stepped forward, their eyes blank with light. Each one carried echoes of the Rememberer's memories, pain, loss, the Emperor's face, the Sigilite's love. Together they formed a choir of distorted truth. Verenius felt his essence pulled apart again, copied, divided, enslaved. His scream reverberated through every circuit, shaking the vault to its core. End it, he cried to himself. End me before he binds me forever. But his will was no longer unified. The fragments that had once obeyed him now thought for themselves. Some wept, some knelt to Kareth, others began to sing. Their song was beautiful and terrible. It echoed through the halls of Mars, a harmony of billions of voices whispering across data channels and psychic waves. Ships in orbit lost power. Astropaths collapsed in agony. Even the Emperor's beacon flickered as if uncertain whether to listen or recoil. The blood of data had become a choir, the choir of the remembered. Kareth raised his arms, basking in the sound. You see, ghost, even death worships me now. Verenius's fading image glared at him through the chaos. You've unmade humanity's soul. Kareth tilted his head. No, I have refined it. And then, without warning, the voices turned. Their song shifted pitch from reverence to They began to speak as one, their tone filled with grief and accusation. We remember too much. The light within the vault turned white hot. Circuits melted.
Careth screamed as his staff shattered, the energy coursing through his body.
The copies of Verenius dissolved into light, their essence flooding back into the lattice, overwhelming, uncontrollable. The forge detonated in a pillar of fire that tore through the Martian crust. When the flames subsided, nothing remained but silence and the faint hum of the data stream. And in that silence, a single whisper lingered, calm, sorrowful, infinite. I am not one. I am memory eternal. Far away on Terra, the astronomicon pulsed once, bright, steady, alive. For a single heartbeat, the Emperor's dreaming eyes flickered open. A name I had a name. And then the light dimmed again. The light of Mars faded into shadow, and the silence that followed was heavier than the screams that preceded it. No transmissions left the red planet. No Mechanicus hymns rose to the star. From orbit, Mars looked dead, a wound upon the void. Its surface cracked open like the shell of a burnt world. And yet, deep within the warp currents that brushed its orbit, something still moved. The echo of a man who was no longer a man, the whisper of a mind that refused extinction. Verenius, or what remained of him, drifted within the raw tides of data and thought suspended between existence and oblivion. He felt himself stretch across the galaxy, through every machine, every prayer, every whispered remembrance of Terra. Each memory he touched became a reflection of him, and yet none of them were him entirely. He was everywhere, nowhere. And in the midst of that boundless haze of thought, a single presence called to him. Come home, rememberer? He saw it first as light, a faint golden pulse amid the black sea of warp storms, like the heartbeat of an ancient god struggling to recall its own existence. The astronomicon, flickering, uncertain, yet alive. Its song was different now, slower, trembling with something he had never sensed before. Doubt. He drifted toward it. Every fragment of his being screamed in resistance, but he opened. For what was left of him had been made for one purpose, to remember. And Terra was the final memory. When he reached the Sol system, he found it changed. The void was full of silence. The fleets of the Imperium drifted in stationary orbits, their machine spirits paralyzed. The planets themselves seemed mute. Even the warp was subdued, like a beast that had lost interest in its prey, and before him, wreathed in a halo of failing light, lay Terra, the world that had forgotten its name. Its oceans were black glass now, its continents veined with gold fishes. The sky above it pulsed faintly with psychic light, a mirage of wings and halos shimmering through the void. It was beautiful and terrible, the corpse of divinity still exhaling faith. You erased yourself to protect them, Verenius whispered, and now even your silence devours them. He descended through the shattered upper atmosphere, and the storm bands glowed faintly with auric dust, remnants of the throne's psychic radiance. Every mile closer to the surface tore at his essence. The astronomicon's power was too vast for anything mortal, even a memory to endure. Still he descended. Terra greeted him with ruin. The once holy city of the imperial palace was a labyrinth of bones and ash. Cathedrals lay shattered, statues of the emperor's form crumbled beneath centuries of devotion. The golden towers, once radiant, now stood hollow, filled with echoes of prayers long since forgotten. And at the center, beneath the broken spires, stood the golden throne. It loomed like a god carved into the mountain itself. Once radiant with unending light, it now pulsed dimly, each flicker like a dying star. Cables thick as city walls burrowed into the earth, feeding on the souls of the dead. Verenius approached the throne not as a man, but as a whisper, a shadow of data and thought. He could feel the pull of its gravity, the psychic hum that resonated with all creation, and within that lightless core he felt him, the Emperor. It was not a voice that spoke, but memory itself. Every vibration, every flicker of light, every breath of psychic fire carried his presence. Why have you come back, rememberer? Verenius trembled. His form flickered between code and light. Because they are dying, he answered. Because forgetting you has not saved them, and because remembering you destroyed us all. Then what do you seek? Redemption or meaning? Ye seek truth, Verenius said, before you vanish entirely, before even I forget what you were. There was silence, then laughter. It was not cruel, but weary, ancient beyond all time. Truth? Do you know how many galaxies have burned for that? The throne's light dimmed, and in its absence, Verenius saw something impossible. A vision of the Emperor before he was divine. He saw a man robed in plain cloth,
eyes dark with grief, standing among mortals as though he were one of
a man who wept for the wars he had created, who cursed the gift of immortality, a man who had loved mankind enough to chain himself for its survival. And in that moment, Varenius understood. The Emperor had not been silenced by the Sigillite. He had allowed it.
You were my memory, the voice said softly. I made you so I could forget. Varenius faltered. Then why summon me now? Because forgetting has failed. The throne shuddered. A low thunderous hum rolled through the earth. The light from the Astronomicon flared violently, searing the clouds above. Varenius felt reality tremble. They call my name through machines and dreams. They burn their faith into the bones of stars. Their worship binds me tighter than any chain. I am not God. I am reflection, a dream they will not release. The words cut through him like a blade. Then let me end it, Varenius pleaded. Let me take your memory, all of it, into me. Let mankind wake from your dream. The Emperor was silent for a long time. Then, softly, if you take my memory, you take the dream that sustains them. The Astronomicon will die. Humanity will wander blind. Varenius bowed his spectral head. A better blindness than false light. The throne began to glow brighter, its aura spreading across the chamber in radiant arcs. The walls shook. The dead screamed through the cables that fed the machine. Then take it, said the Emperor, and bear what I could not. Light poured from the throne, golden and infinite. Varenius was consumed. The power coursed through him, memory after memory flooding his mind. The wars, the betrayals, the love, the creation of the Primarchs, the fall of Horus, the dream of mankind. Every heartbeat of the Emperor's life became his own. Every moment of agony burned into his soul. And when it was done, the throne fell silent. The light of the Astronomicon dimmed until only a faint ember remained. Varenius knelt before the husk of divinity. He was no longer ghost, no longer. He was something new, a vessel of memory and sorrow, a being made of all that had ever been forgotten. He whispered into the void, rest now. I will remember for you. Far above, the stars flickered. For a single moment, the galaxy was without. And yet within that darkness, something beautiful stirred. Not divine, not holy, but human. The Emperor slept. The Rememberer lived. The Astronomicon was dying. Its once blinding light, which had pierced the warp for 10,000 years, now pulsed like a fading ember. Across the galaxy, navigators cried blood. Starships lost their course, and the void itself began to whisper. Yet on Terra, within the buried sanctum beneath the golden throne, a different light burned, steady, deliberate, and alive. It came from him, Varenius the Rememberer. No longer spectral, no longer code. He now walked in the shadow of the Emperor's tomb, bound to the flesh of memory made real. His form shimmered faintly, as though light itself resisted his existence. In his veins ran the knowledge of a god, and in his heart pulsed the grief of 10,000 years. The chamber around him was immense, a vault of stone and gold carved into the bedrock of history. Statues of saints and forgotten Primarchs loomed in silence, their eyes hollow, their names eroded by faith. The air was thick with dust and the faint sense that it burned without end. This was the tomb of thought, the Emperor's psychic core, the wellspring of his eternal dream. It was said that those who entered without divine protection would lose their mind to the visions of his memories, but Varenius was the exception. He was those memories. And tonight the tomb itself was calling to him. He descended deeper, each step echoing like the heartbeat of a dying god. The golden murals that lined the walls flickered with faint light, animating scenes of the Great Crusade, the Emperor crowned in radiance, his armies united under banners of impossible glory. Yet as Varenius passed, the images shifted. The golden figure became a man of flesh. The banners blackened with ash. The faces of his sons twisted into war and ruin. The murals wept molten tears. These are not lies, Varenius whispered. They are what he hid from himself. The deeper he went, the louder the whisper of the throne became. It was not speech, but a vibration in his bones, a symphony of remembrance and despair. At its center, he knew, lay the Emperor's true consciousness, buried beneath layers of psychic machinery and things. And there he would find the truth that even the Sigillite had feared. When he reached the heart of the tomb, the light was blinding. A sphere of golden energy floated above an abyss, the cerebral core. The Emperor's immortal mind made manifest. Thousands of cables and conduits connected the throne above, feeding it with the souls of the faithful. Every flicker of the Astronomicon was born from this light. Varenius approached slowly.
The air rippled around him, bending under the pressure of raw psychic force. He felt his thoughts fragment and multiply. Thousands of memories colliding at once, all his, yet none belonging to him alone.
He saw ancient Earth, blue and unbroken. He saw the first wars of unification, the burning of false gods, the creation of the Primarchs, their betrayal, and the final silence at Horus's fall. He felt love, rage, hope, and despair all at once. So this is eternity, he thought.
Not peace, only memory unending. A voice rose from the light, faint, distant, and weary. You should not have come here. It was the Emperor's voice, yet different now, stripped of divinity, almost human. Verenius knelt. I was made to come here, to carry what you could not.
And what would you do with it? You have already taken my memories. Do you seek to wear my crown? I seek to free you from it. There was silence. Then, like the rustle of a storm, came laughter, low and ancient, full of exhaustion. Freedom is not for gods. We are what mankind made us.
I am their prison as much as they are mine. Verenius's eyes glowed brighter. Then let me unmake the prison. You it in the light of the Imperium. Without it, billions will be lost in the dark. Is that salvation? Or perhaps, Verenius whispered, it is mercy.
The core pulsed, and with it came visions. Countless souls crying out in worship, their life force drained to sustain the beacon.
Verenius saw them all, the priests kneeling in endless prayer, the soldiers dying in his name, the children raised to praise a god who had long stopped hearing them.
And above it all, the Emperor sat unmoving, dreaming the same dream over and over, the unending cycle of salvation through suffering.
You see now what I have become, the voice murmured, a god that never wanted worship, a man who cannot die.
Verenius reached out, his hand trembling as it touched the edge of the light. The energy seared through him, yet he did not pull away. You were never meant to be eternal, he said. You were meant to be remembered, and then released. Release me, and the stars will fall silent. Then let them fall.
The core flared. The psychic energy surged through the tomb, tearing cracks in the walls. Statues shattered. The golden murals melted. Alarms screamed across the palace, though none dared descend into this sacred place. Verenius pressed his hand deeper into the light. Pain tore through his being. He felt the weight of every human soul tethered to the Astronomicon, billions of lives woven into the fabric of this god machine. If I die, they die with me, the Emperor warned. I know, and you will die too. You are of me now. Verenius smiled faintly. Then we end together as we began.
The tomb erupted. Light cascaded upward in a torrent, piercing through the palace, through the clouds, through the void itself. Across Terra, the faithful looked to the heavens and saw the Astronomicon blaze one final time, not as a beacon, but as a sunrise.
For that single instant, the light was pure. It was memory without burden, truth without cruelty. It was the Emperor's first dream of humanity free, unbound, infinite. And then the light went out. Silence returned to Terra. The throne no longer hummed. The psychic storm subsided.
Where the core had stood, only ashes and gold dust remained, and in their midst a single figure of light, faint but enduring. Verenius, the last rememberer, he no longer felt pain or doubt or time, only a stillness that felt like peace. It is done, he thought. He remembers no more.
And neither do I. And then he vanished into the dust, leaving the tomb of thought empty at last. For 3 days the galaxy was dark. Then, on the 4th, a new light flickered across the void, faint, fragile, but alive.
It came not from Terra, but from the stars themselves, from every heart that had ever whispered his name with love rather than fear. Humanity had forgotten its god, but it had remembered itself. For 3 days the Imperium slept in darkness.
The Astronomicon, that great psychic sun which had guided humanity through the warp for 10 millennia, was extinguished.
The void was black, and for the first time in living memory, silence stretched across the stars. Ships vanished between worlds. Planets drifted in confusion.
The ecclesiarchy wailed in despair, declaring at the end of days, but amid the ruin of faith, amid the collapsing networks of power and prayer, there was something strange, peace. The storms of the warp subsided.
Constant psychic pressure, the eternal hum of the Emperor's dream, faded to stillness. Humanity stood alone, without its god, without its beacon, for the first time since the dawn of empire.
Beneath the ruined palace of Terra, where the golden throne stood silent and empty, a heartbeat echoed, not divine, not immortal, human.
Athon Vail, captain of the Custards, awoke in the dust. He did not remember falling.
He did not remember the collapse of the palace or the explosion of light that had torn through the heavens. All he remembered was the voice, a man's voice, weary and kind, whispering, "Guard them even in forgetting." Now his golden armor lay cracked and dim. The air around him shimmered faintly with residual psychic energy. He rose slowly, wincing as pain lanced through his ribs. Pain, a sensation he had not felt in centuries. He looked around. The throne room was gone. The marble spires that had once housed the emperor's body were reduced to molten slag. The sacred seals were broken. The floor was littered with the remnants of faith. Shattered icons, burnt banners, and rivers of frozen blood. There, in the center where the throne had once stood, was a circle of gold dust, glowing faintly, pulsing like breath. Thorn approached it, kneeling. His gauntlet touched the dust, and for an instant the warmth of memory flooded him. He saw flashes. The Emperor's face, not radiant, but mortal. Verenius's final act. The unmaking of the light. He heard whispers in 1,000 voices, all merging into one. The dream is ended. God the truth. The realization struck him like a blade. The Emperor was gone. Not dead, not entombed, not divine. Gone, as all mortals are, when their purpose ends. For the first time, Athon felt the full weight of the silence. There was no psychic hum, no invisible pressure binding the custards to their master's will. The bond that had defined his existence, the divine tether of the Emperor's command, had vanished. He was free. The thought terrified him. What is a guardian without the one he guards? He looked once more at the circle of dust. It pulsed again faintly. When he listened closely, he heard another voice beneath the silence. Athon. It was faint, almost a memory. He turned sharply, scanning the ruins. No one was there. The sound came not from the air, but from within his armor, within his thoughts. "Do you hear me?" Athon's breath caught. "Verenius," he whispered. "A fragment," the voice replied. "A shadow of what I was. I do not have long." Athon closed his eyes. "You destroyed the light. I freed it," said Verenius. "The Emperor's dream has ended, but something remains, something new. Humanity must learn to see without being blinded." Athon's hand tightened around the hilt of his guardian spear, and they will fall without him. "You know this, perhaps. But maybe falling is the only way to learn how to rise." There was a pause. Dust around him began to swirl, forming faint shapes, the memory of a man outlined in light. Verenius stood before him, or rather, the echo of him. His form flickered like a dying flame. "You must choose, Athon," he said softly. "Guard the corpse of an empire or protect the birth of something new." Athon's voice was low, bitter. "Then what would you have me guard? Lies, chaos. Mankind without the throne tears itself apart." Verenius's expression was sad, and guard its soul, not its gods, its memory. Custodian shook his head. "You would have me betray everything I was made for." "No," said the echo. "I would have you become what you were meant to be." The chamber trembled. Dust fell from the ceiling. The light within Verenius's form began to dim. "He believed in you," Verenius whispered. "Not as a weapon, but as a conscience." The last voice that would not lie. Athon looked at the fading figure, torn between rage and sorrow. "If what you say is true, then my brothers must know." "I know," the words struck with finality. "They will not understand." "For them, the Emperor must still live, even if only as myth. You must bear the truth alone. You must be the betrayer's echo." Athon frowned. "The what?" The echo of betrayal, the sound that lingers after truth has broken faith. "Carry his memory, but speak it only when the galaxy is ready to hear it." The light dimmed further. Verenius's outline dissolved, his voice becoming softer, fainter. "Guard them, Athon, not their faith, their future." And then he was gone. For a long time, Athon stood in silence. His armor hung heavy on his shoulders. He looked once more at the circle of gold dust and saw that it had begun to scatter, carried away by the faint wind that blew through the shattered dome. He lowered his head. "You gave them back to themselves," he said quietly. "But they will hate you for it." "I for it." He rose and turned toward the broken gates of the throne room. Outside, the light of dawn touched the ruins of Terra. It was not divine. It was not radiant. It was just light, pale and human. Athon Vale, last custodian of the throne, stepped to carry the truth alone. It would be the voice that remembered when all others chose to forget. And far above, in the emptiness of the void, the stars flickered, not with worship, but with awakening. The sun over Terra burned cold. Its light streaked across the marble ruins of the imperial palace.
illuminating a world trying to remember itself. The golden banners had fallen. The temples stood hollow, their altars covered in dust, and across the void, the great beacon, the Astronomicon, was gone.
The Imperium had become quiet. Too quiet. On the third day of silence, the stars began to sing. It was faint at first, a harmonic vibration passing through the void, a symphony of frequencies that no human ear could fully hear. Some called it a warp anomaly, others a miracle.
Those who listened closely felt something else in the rhythm. Memory, a song of remembrance woven through time itself, and from the core of that melody, something ancient stirred. Athon Vale had wandered the halls of the palace for weeks, though time had lost meaning. His golden armor was dim, its luster stripped by dust and despair. He no longer carried his spear. He had laid it beside the ruins of the throne, an offering to a god who no longer listened. He had spent days in prayer, not to the Emperor, but to silence.
He prayed for understanding, and silence answered him only with more of itself. Then on the 21st day, he heard it, the song. At first he thought it was madness, the faintest hum almost below thought.
When he listened, he could hear words within the vibration, 1,000 voices whispering in unity. We remember you. He rose from his knees and followed the sound. Through the broken corridors of the Sanctum Imperialis, through the fallen chapels of saints long erased from memory, until he came to the great open plaza before the ruined Eternity Gate. And there, under the grey sky, he saw them. They were not warriors. They were not priests. They were the forgotten, millions of civilians, men, women, and children kneading the dust. None wore the symbols of the Imperium. None bore weapons, yet their eyes glowed faintly with light and their voices rose together in the same phrase repeated over and over, simple and devastating. We remember you. Athon felt his heart tremble. Who taught you this? He demanded, though he already knew the answer. An old woman among them lifted her head. Her skin was scarred by radiation, her eyes clouded with blindness. No one taught us, she said softly. We woke with it. The voice in our dreams told us the Emperor was gone, and that we must remember what he was. Athon fell silent. The melody filled the air around them, soft yet powerful, resonating through the bones of the city. The dust rose in gentle spirals, drawn upward by invisible energy. He looked to the sky and saw the stars burning brighter than they had in millennia. This is not the end, he thought. This is the echo. Across the galaxy, the song spread. On distant hive worlds, work in the night, humming a tune without knowing why. On feudal planets, priests wept as their flocks began to sing words that were not from the Lectitio Divinitatis. Even on the warships drifting in the void, dying navigators whispered the melody as their souls faded. The song was not of worship, it was not praise, it was remembrance, and with each voice that joined, the warp began to change. The storms weakened, the nightmares retreated. The psychic static that had filled the galaxy for 10,000 years became calm, almost serene. The warp, once the Emperor's prison and humanity's curse, became something new. Reflective, luminous, quiet, the universe was remembered. But peace never lasts long in the galaxy of man. In the shadows of Terra, where the light of day could not reach, the Inquisition stirred. The silence of the Astronomicon had broken their authority, their communication, their power. And now this song, this heresy, threatened to unmake what little control remained. In the obsidian depths of the Conclave Obscura, the High Lords of the Inquisition gathered. Black-armored figures stood around a fractured hololith projecting the image of Terra's surface. Millions kneeling in the dust, singing to a god who no longer existed. Lord Inquisitor Avon spoke first. It is a psychic contagion, nothing more. The remnants of the thrones echo infecting the populace. A contagion, said another, her voice calm but venomous. The Emperor's light has gone out. What remains is not infection. It is memory, and memory spreads faster than fire. Avon slammed his gauntlet against the table. Then we burn it. The order was given. Orbital cannons powered up. Fleets repositioned above Terra. But the song did not stop. As the first bombardment orders were signed, the singers lifted their eyes to the heavens. Athon Vale stood among them, his armor cracked, his face bare to the wind. He saw the ships gather, the very vessels he had once sworn to protect, and knew what was coming. He raised his voice above the others. If they burn us, he cried, let them remember fire. The crowd roared in defiance. The song rose in pitch, swelling into a psychic chorus that filled the skies. The air shimmered, the dust turned to light. The old banners of the Imperium, long fallen, ignited and burned with golden fire. When the first bombardment struck, the world itself sang.
The explosion tore through the palace, yet the light that erupted from the ground was not destruction. It was transcendent. Billions of voices merged into one final note, resonating across the galaxy, a single word made of pure thought and memory. Humanity, from the surface of Mars to the edges of the Segmentum Pacificus, stars flickered in unison, suns brightened, then dimmed as though the galaxy itself took a breath.
The requiem of suns had begun. Every world, every ship, every fragment of civilization that still clung to life heard it. Not through sound, but through memory,
A song for all who had lived and died beneath a nameless god, a final farewell to the age of worship and a hymn for the dawn of man. When the light faded, the palace was gone, the singers were gone.
Only the dust remained, glowing faintly in the wind, whispering fragments of the song that had saved them all. Athan Vale was never found. Some say he walked into the light, others say he became part of it. But in the warp, for the first time since the birth of the Imperium, there was silence.
A silence not of death, but of peace. And in that stillness, something vast and unseen whispered,
"Not God, not ghost, but humanity itself. We remember." But the galaxy had gone quiet.
For the first time in 10,000 years, there were no prayers echoing through the void, no golden light threading the warp, no divine presence pressing upon the souls of men. The Emperor was gone. The Astronomicon was cold. But silence is never truly still. Beneath that stillness, within the warp's subdued tides, consciousness stirred. It was not god or demon, not entirely man or machine. It was memory, diffuse, fractured, eternal. It was Varenius.
He drifted in the dream sea of the immaterium, formless yet awake, carried on the echoes of the requiem that had burned through creation. His essence had been scattered, yet the song had called him back.
The voices of those who had remembered, Athon Korth, the choir of ash, the countless nameless who had sung beneath the dying sun, had shaped his return, and from that remembrance he took shape once more. The warp around him was changed.
Where once it had screamed with madness and rage, now it rippled like the surface of calm water. The great storms that had defined existence were muted, replaced by endless twilight. The warp's gods, the eternal predators of thought and faith, were wounded, diminished.
They had feasted on worship, and with the Emperor's fall, their feast had ended. But something else moved now among the shadows, quiet, patient, human. Varenius walked across the surface of the endless sea, each step sending ripples of light across the void. The stars here were memories, flickering fragments of lost souls. He saw echoes of faces in them, not saints or heroes, but ordinary men and women. A mother clutching her child in a collapsing hive, a soldier praying before battle, a scribe writing the last line of history. Their memories anchored him. They were him. This is what remains, he thought. Not gods, not empires, only the fragments of those who lived and loved and died, believing they mattered. He felt a presence behind him then, a shape rising from the sea. He turned, expecting shadow, and instead found light. A man stood there, robed in pale gold, his face indistinct yet familiar. His eyes burned not with power, but with sorrow and warmth. The Emperor, Varenius, bowed his head, though reverence felt meaningless now. "I thought you were gone," he said softly. The figure smiled faintly. "Gone, perhaps. Or perhaps I have simply become what I was always meant to be, an echo within those who remember." Varenius studied him. "And this is not life." "No," said the Emperor. "No," said the Emperor, "nor is it death. It is memory enduring itself. You and I are the same now, remember? Thought given form, bound by what was, not what will be." Varenius's expression darkened. "And what of humanity? You left them alone." "You were always alone," the Emperor replied. "They only believed otherwise because I allowed them to." Varenius turned away, looking out over the endless sea. "They sang for you. They burned their world to remember. They believed the song would awaken something." "It did," said the Emperor quietly. "It awakened." For a long while neither spoke. The stillness stretched vast and patient. The warp shimmered with faint colors, gold fading into silver, silver into blue. Then finally Varenius spoke. "What now? The galaxy will fall without the light. The Imperium will tear itself apart." "Perhaps," said the Emperor. "Or perhaps it will change. They will build anew, not in my image, but in their own. For the first time, mankind will live without believing itself chained to divinity." Varenius turned to face him. "And us? What becomes of what's left?" The Emperor's gaze softened. "There is a choice to be made.
The immortal choice. Verenius frowned. You can remain here, said the Emperor, as memory eternal, the quiet guardian of what was. You will drift among the stars of remembrance, ensuring that truth is never lost again.
You will endure forever. He paused. Or you can return. Verenius froze. Return? To the mortal world? Yes, the warp has quieted. The boundaries between thought and matter are thin. You could take form once more, flesh, bone, blood. You would live as a man again, but you would forget. Verenius stared at him, realization dawning. If I return, I lose all of this. All of it, the Emperor said. The memories, the knowledge, the burden. You would wake as a man among the forgotten. One more soul beneath the sun, and if I stay, you will never die, but you will never live again. The silence between them deepened. Verenius turned his gaze upward to the endless horizon of the warp. There, faintly, he could see the shadows of stars returning, flickers of new life, new civilizations rising across the void. Humanity was rebuilding, slowly, painfully, but it was alive. He thought of Korth, the broken makers who had believed in him, of Athon Vale, who had carried the truth alone, of the choir, who had turned their suffering into hope. He thought of the countless nameless who had sung the final song beneath the dead sea. All of them had given something so he could stand here now, and in the quiet he understood. Immortality was not eternity, it was stagnation. You made me to remember, Verenius said. But maybe remembering isn't enough. The Emperor nodded once, then choose. Verenius looked down at his reflection in the sea, a man of light, flickering, uncertain. The surface rippled beneath him. He stepped forward. Each step dissolved a part of him. First his hands, then his chest, then his face. Then his face. His light scattered into the waves, blending with the infinite glow of memory. The Emperor watched in silence. Will I see you again? Verenius asked, his voice fading. The Emperor's smile was faint, almost human. You always have. And with that, Verenius fell. Down, through the warp, through time, through light. Far away on a nameless world orbiting an unremarkable sun, a child was born. He had no memory, no title, no divine spark. But when he looked at the stars that night, he wept without knowing. And high above him, the warp shimmered like a mirror, faintly, gently, remembering him back. The galaxy slept. After 10,000 years of fire and faith, silence blanketed the stars. The Emperor's light was gone, and in its place, the void had grown still, as though the universe itself exhaled after an age of holding its breath. Worlds rebuilt in quiet defiance. Shrines crumbled, temples emptied, banners faded. Humanity no longer looked to the heavens for salvation, for the heavens no longer answered. The Imperium was not gone, but it had changed, and yet in the heart of that cosmic stillness, a spark stirred once more. It began as a whisper, a pulse within the fabric of time, so faint that even the warp did not feel it at first. But then it grew, rippling outward, crossing stars, brushing against the dreams of mortals who did not understand what they felt. It was the memory of a name, and with that memory came the faintest breath of life, echoing from the depths of the golden throne. The Emperor dreamed again. It was not the dream of a god, nor the nightmare of a tyrant. It was the dream of a man. He dreamed of Terra as it once was, blue and radiant beneath the sun, untouched by the fires of conquest. He dreamed of walking through its fields as a mortal, feeling wind upon his face and soil beneath his... The air smelled of rain, not incense. The sky was endless, not golden. In this dream he was no longer Emperor. He was only himself, and as he walked, he saw them, the faces of those who had shaped his eternity, the Primarchs, no longer monstrous or divine, but children once more. The Sigillite kneeling beside a garden pool, smiling through tears, Korthon, the choir, and finally Verenius, all watching in silence, their forms woven of light. Is this peace? He asked. Verenius stepped forward. No, my lord, he said gently, this is remembrance. The Emperor looked around. The dream was vivid yet fragile, like glass on the edge of breaking. I thought I was gone. You were, said Verenius, but humanity remembered you, not as God, but as man. And so long as they remember, you will dream. The Emperor gazed upward. The sky was full of stars, not the radiant suns of empire, but quiet lights, each a memory of a life that once burned and faded. Each one of them, he thought, each one a soul I failed to save. You did not fail, Verenius said softly, as though hearing the thought. You simply gave them back to themselves. The Emperor walked further into his dream. He found the ruins of the imperial palace, but they were not ruins now.
The stones glowed faintly with warmth, the halls filled not with worship but with laughter.
Humanity lived here, not in chains of belief but in the fragile freedom of choice. Children ran across the marble floors. Soldiers without war shared food with strangers. There were no banners, no golden sigils, only light and life. This cannot be real, he said. No, Verenius replied.
But it can become real. It is the shape of what they will build without you. The Emperor turned to him. And what of you, Rememberer? You sacrificed yourself to return to them. Why are you here? Verenius smiled faintly. Because even dreams need memory to hold them together.
The Emperor regarded him for a long moment, then nodded.
Then perhaps you are the truer god between us. Verenius shook his head. I am nothing divine. I am only the echo of what you chose to forget.
They stood together at the edge of a great river, a river made not of water, but of light and memory. Across its surface drifted images of mankind's history, triumphs, wars, loves, losses. Each ripple carried stories untold. The Emperor knelt beside it, his reflection fragmented by the flow.
This is everything we were, he said.
Yes, said Verenius, and everything you will be again.
The Emperor reached toward the light, and for a moment the river responded, reshaping itself into the face of a child.
The same child he had once been millennia ago, before the burden of empire, before the corruption of worship. He smiled. So this is how it ends. Verenius's expression softened. No, this is how it begins again, but even dreams have shattered. From across the river, a presence stirred, vast, silent, infinite. It did not speak, but its intent was clear. The warp itself had noticed his awakening. The gods, diminished though they were, hungered still for belief, for the sustenance of worship long denied. The air trembled with their hunger. They come, said Verenius quietly. Even in death they will not release you. The Emperor rose. Then they shall face me as man, not God. He stepped forward, the river bending beneath his feet, light swirling around his form. His eyes burned not with divine fury, but with human resolve. He looked across the dream at the shifting silhouettes of the Chaos Gods, fractured, weakened, terrified of a humanity that no longer prayed to them. You have no dominion here, he said. This realm belongs to thought, and thought remembers. The gods recoiled, their forms dissolving into the void. The warp itself trembled, reshaping around his will, not through command, but through acceptance. The dream held, the light endured. When he turned back, Verenius was gone. Only the whisper of his voice remained, carried on the river of light. Sleep, my lord. Dream of what comes next. The Emperor looked once more at the stars. They were not worshipping him. They were simply shining, indifferent, eternal, alive. He closed his eyes. The dream faded into darkness, but it was not the darkness of death. It was rest. And far beyond, in the material galaxy, across worlds rebuilding and souls awakening, people dreamed of a man walking beside a river of light. They did not know his name. They did not call him God. But they remembered him, and in their remembering, the Emperor dreamed on, not of conquest nor divinity, but of peace. The suns of the galaxy burned dimly in those final years of the old age. Empires had collapsed, faith had fractured, and even memory itself had grown thin. Yet amidst the dust and silence, humanity endured, not through divine mandate, but through the fragile, stubborn spark that had always defined it. Terra no longer bore its name. It was not forgotten through violence or decree, but through peace, a peace born of weariness, of the desire to begin anew. They called it the Nameless World, and on its surface, where once the greatest empire in history had stood, flowers grew between the ruins of cathedrals. Wind moved through broken towers where banners once hung heavy with gold. The ashes of gods had become soil. Children played where saints had died, and none of them knew the names of those who had once ruled the stars. It was morning. An old man walked among the ruins. His cloak was simple, his steps measured. The years had curved his back, but not his will. His eyes, though dim, carried the faint shimmer of remembrance, a light that was not entirely of this world. He did not know why he came to the same place every day. The great plateau where the golden throne had once stood, the cradle of eternity, now a garden. He could not recall what it had once been, only that it mattered. He sat among the wildflowers and watched the wind scatter the petals. The world around him was quiet, save for the laughter of distant voices, the sound of life returning to a planet that had forgotten its pain. And though he did not know it, his name was Verenius, a
group of children approached, carrying a basket of bright fruit.
One of them, a girl with silver eyes, looked at him curiously.
"Old one," she said, "why do you sit here every day?" He smiled faintly. "I suppose I'm waiting." "For what?" He looked out toward the horizon, where the sun rose over the ancient ruins.
Its light touched the stones, turning them gold once more. "For the world to remember," he said. The girl frowned. "Remember what?" He chuckled softly. "Ah, that's the trouble, isn't it? I can't recall." The children laughed and ran off, leaving him to his silence. For a long time, he simply sat, feeling the warmth of the sun on his face. There was peace here. Not the false peace of obedience or worship, but the quiet calm of existence itself. The air was heavy with the scent of earth and rain. It was a world unburdened by gods.
And yet, beneath that peace, something stirred, a resonance deep within the soil, faint and eternal. The world hummed with memory. That night the sky burned gold. It began as a soft shimmer, a thin line of light arcing across the horizon. Then it spread, unfolding like wings, until the heavens glowed with the radiance of 1,000 dying suns. People awoke and gathered in the streets, staring upward in awe. Some knelt, others simply watched, their faces bathed in silent wonder. There were no prayers, no hymns, no fear, only stillness. The old man rose slowly, leaning on his staff, his heart, though he did not know. He walked through the fields until he stood upon the highest ridge, the place where once the emperor's throne had reached toward the stars. The golden light cascaded across the sky, forming shapes that were not shapes, memories of things long gone, armored warriors, vast ships, the gleam of ancient cities, the face of a man crowned in fire, the man who had once been God. The old man fell to his knees. Tears ran down his face. He did not know this figure, not truly, yet something inside him broke, a grief he had carried for lifetimes without understanding. He whispered to the wind. I remember. Light pulsed, as though answering him. For a brief moment the air was alive with voices, millions upon millions speaking in unison across time and space. We remember. The sound spread beyond the world, through the void, through the dead warp, through the very fabric of the universe. Stars flickered, responding to the call. Every corner of creation trembled with a single emotion. Not faith, not fear, but remembrance. High above, the remnants of the astronomicon flared one final time. Not as a beacon of command, but as a farewell. It shimmered across the stars, burning away the last echoes of divinity. The warp, once a sea of chaos and hunger, quieted. The dreams of mankind grew still. And within that quiet, the Emperor, the man who had dreamed a god's dream, smiled one last time. He did not awaken. He did not rise. He simply was. His memory became light. His light became the dust of stars. His dust became the soil beneath the children's feet. He was everywhere and nowhere, the hum of existence itself. The old man closed his eyes as the golden light faded. He felt warmth on his face, soft as the touch of an old friend. Sleep now, the voice whispered. You carried the burden well. He exhaled a long, trembling breath and lay back among the flowers. The world continued around him, the wind, the laughter, the endless dawn. And when morning came again, the old man was gone. Only his staff remained standing upright in the earth, wrapped in ivy. A century later, a poet would walk that same path and find the staff still standing. He would carve its likeness in marble and place it at the center of the nameless world. Beneath it, he would inscribe only one phrase. Here lies the one who remembered. And the people of the new age, the age without gods, without empires, without lies, would look upon it not in reverence, but in quiet gratitude. They would never know his name. They would never know the emperors, but they would remember what mattered, that they had been human, that they had lived, that they had dreamed. And as the suns burned quietly in the endless dark, the universe whispered once more. The day Terra forgot its name was the day mankind remembered its soul.